The poor dog, chained under the bridge all his life, has finally been rescued. I adopted him and... It was morning time and the sun was rising. This was evident by the golden light that was being reflected on the cityscape. Alice was a kind lady who was in her early 30s, and she also took a walk to work as usual. Daily she used to cross the old stone bridge, the kind of bridge which forms a curve over the river. The bridge is one of the ancient structures which was common to the sight of Alice. But today something unusual caught her eye. Underneath the bridge, nestled among the shadows and debris, was a dog. Its fur was matted and filthy, its eyes wide with fear. Alice paused, her heart clenching at the sight. The dog, a forlorn and emaciated creature, lay chained to a rusty post. She had never noticed it before, and its sudden appearance piqued her curiosity. Who could have left it here? Why was it in such a pitiful state? Alice bowed her head, not wanting to be given any less. She moved closer. The dog cowered and yelped backwards. She saw a collar on its neck with the tag Robert. Seeing the frightened and dirty dog named Robert evoked a number of questions in Alice's mind regarding his background and future. For several days, he was a subject of her every thought and plan. She could not get him off her mind. Every morning, she would bring some food and water and put them in front of him but a little beyond his paw so that he could get it by stretching, and was forced to eat. First, Robert felt fear, but when the feeling of hunger dominated him, he lost his fear. Alice just stood and observed him as he ate, and while observing him, she felt so sad seeing him so desperate to eat. One evening when Alice was about to go home after delivering the food, a loud noise of something moving in the bushes close to the house startled her. She barely had time to think before a huge attack dog-looking stray dog came out. It looked directly into the plate of food that Robert had brought in and moved forward growling and with obvious intention of violence. Robert was in shock and fear, unable to react, and quickly enough, he was too weak and scared to fight back. Panic surged through Alice. Irrationally, she picked up a large stick standing close to the ground and ran towards Robert full speed. The stray was ready to attack and was only a few feet away from Robert. Alice's adrenaline was flowing as she moved to stand right between Robert and the stray, tightly gripping the stick. The stray lunged at her, and she hurled the stick with vigor straight toward the animal's head. But she balked at the last moment. Finally, the stray stopped in its tracks, but not for long, backward a little, but kept going round them, baring its teeth menacingly. Alice's hands were shaking, but she did not run away. She shouted and threatened the stray with the stick she had in her hand. Now the tension is epic. The stray does not cease growling throughout the night. It could be heard from the neighbors' houses. Just when it seemed the stray might attack again, a loud honk pierced the air. A car appeared on the road above the bridge, its headlights flashing as the driver leaned on the horn. The stray, startled by the noise and lights, hesitated for a moment before retreating into the darkness with one last menacing growl. Hearing this, Alice knelt down on the ground, and the stick fell from her hands. Both she and Robert were shaking, panting a little, but she hurried to wake him up. To her surprise, instead of retreating, Robert had moved closer to her, his wide eyes reflecting a mix of fear and newfound trust. After one rainy afternoon, Alice decided that it is high time to have a closer look at them. She had started speaking to Robert softly as she crouched near the bridge area, so as not to be easily seen. And days turn into weeks, a friendship bond starts between the two of them. Finally, the flash of trust replaced Robert's fear that had developed in the beginning of the story. Alice's routine of bringing food and water became a daily mission. She noticed how Robert's condition was worsening, his fur thinning, his movements lethargic. It was clear that he had been abandoned and neglected for a long time. This realization fueled her determination to rescue him. She knew she had to act quickly before it was too late. One evening, Alice came to the bridge with her traditional items in her hands. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw a group of teenagers gathered near Robert's makeshift shelter. They were laughing and throwing rocks, taunting the helpless dog as he cowered in fear. Panic surged through Alice. She knew she had to intervene before things escalated further. Without thinking, Alice ran toward the group, shouting at them to hold it, to cease. The teens gurgled at her in that suggestive and unpleasant manner that surprised her. Among them was a tall, skinny boy with a scowl on his face, carrying a big stone in his hand. He looked at me menacingly and replied in bitter tones, "What is it to you, lady?" "Yeah, it could well be just a stupid stray." Alice's blood boiled. "Put that down now," she scolded me, and her voice recoiled with a certain blend of terror and anger. She stood in front of Robert and between him and the boys while her body shielding the terrified dog. The boy hesitated, his bravado faltering under Alice's fierce glare. But then he threw the rock anyway, aiming it at the ground near Robert's feet. Alice lunged forward, grabbing the boy's arm before he could pick up another. "Get out of here, all of you," she yelled, her voice filled with a fire she hadn't known she possessed. The other teens, sensing the seriousness in her tone, began to back off. The boy yanked his arm free and took a step back, muttering something under his breath before turning to leave with his friends. They scattered into the night, their laughter fading into the distance. Alice was left standing there, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned to Robert, who was trembling but unharmed. Kneeling beside him, she whispered soothing words, her hand gently brushing against his matted fur. The fear in his eyes slowly subsided as he recognized the woman who had been his only source of kindness. Shaken but resolute, Alice knew she couldn't rely on anyone else to help Robert. The world had failed him, but she wouldn't. She had to do more than just bring him food. She had to save him. Alice began sending letters to local animal emergency services, however. She only received frustration. When the authorities got to know that there is a stray dog under the bridge, they just did not bother. Frustrated but undeterred, Alice took matters into her own hands. She documented Robert's condition, taking photos and keeping a journal of his progress. She hoped this evidence would bolster her case. One evening, as she sat beside Robert, petting him gently, she made a promise. "I'm going to get you out of here," she whispered. "You deserve so much better, Robert." As if understanding, Robert nudged her hand with his nose, a silent plea for the love and care he had been deprived of for so long. Alice's resolve hardened. She could not allow Robert's story to fade off in despair under the bridge. Thus, with more resolve, she began to redraw her strategies to free Robert, having only started her mission to save the dog. While one day Alice was returning from the bridge, at night she began to think of her childhood dog, Max. Max was a lovable golden retriever who had been her best friend, or in fact her companion, for the unbelievable trials and triumphs of life. So she not only recalled the warmth Max offered when her parents decided to break up, the only shoulder to lean on she had during the time of despair. It was impossible to break the connection she had with Max, a pure bond the two of them had, and he showed her true values of loyalty and love. These memories fueled Alice's determination to help Robert. She couldn't bear to think of him suffering any longer. As she prepared for bed, she found herself debating the risks and responsibilities of rescuing Robert. What if she couldn't provide the care he needed? What if she faced legal repercussions for taking him from under the bridge? Despite these fears, her resolve never wavered. The image of Robert's pleading eyes haunted her thoughts, pushing her to act. "I have to do this," she whispered to herself in the dark. "Max would want me to. I can't let Robert suffer any longer." The decision was made. She would rescue Robert, no matter the cost. The next morning, Alice set off to the home that take care of the animals. From the staff, she encountered unyielding collaboration and incapacity since they were overworked and undermanned. They promised to look into it, but Alice knew she couldn't wait. She decided to take matters into her own hands. Armed with her photos and journal entries, she returned to the bridge, determined to make a difference. Alice first attempted to reach out to a number of animal welfare agencies on the phone. Including Robert's case, she also tried to contact a local news channel. She encountered much red tape and cold or even hostile reception in most of the cases. "It's just a stray dog," one official had said, his tone dismissive. But to Alice, Robert was so much more than that. Despite these challenges, Alice continued to visit Robert daily, bringing him food and water and spending time with him. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Robert, once wary and fearful, now wagged his tail and greeted her with a soft bark whenever she approached. The trust he placed in her was palpable, and it filled Alice with a deep sense of purpose. One day, while Alice was feeding Robert, a sympathetic passerby stopped to watch. The woman, who introduced herself as Sarah, expressed concern for the dog's well-being. "I've seen you here every day," Sarah said. "You're doing a great thing for him. Have you considered getting a vet involved?" Alice explained her struggles with the authorities and the animal rescue services. Sarah, a veterinarian herself, offered to help. "Bring him to my clinic," she said. "I'll do whatever I can for him, free of charge." With renewed hope, Alice arranged to bring Robert to Sarah's clinic the next day. The process of unchaining him was emotional and difficult, but Robert seemed to understand that better days were ahead. At the clinic, Sarah conducted a thorough examination and confirmed that Robert had been severely neglected but was otherwise healthy. Alice's bond with Robert deepened as she continued to care for him. She spent her evenings researching dog care and training, determined to provide him with the best life possible. Her friends noticed the change in her, often commenting on her newfound sense of purpose. Meanwhile, her relationship with Sarah blossomed into a supportive friendship. They worked together to navigate the complex world of animal welfare, facing each hurdle with determination. Sarah's connections and expertise proved invaluable, and together they began to see progress. Every evening, Alice would sit by Robert, talking to him about her day and her dreams for his future. Robert, now clean and healthier, would rest his head on her lap, his eyes filled with gratitude and love. Alice knew that rescuing him was the right decision, and their journey together was just beginning. Alice's determination to rescue Robert brought her into direct conflict with local authorities. She had hoped that once Robert was in Sarah's care, things would smooth out, but the reality was far from it. Alice soon found herself embroiled in a bureaucratic nightmare. She faced numerous obstacles from animal control officers and city officials who seemed indifferent to Robert's plight. "It's just a stray," they'd often say, dismissing her concerns. Undeterred, Alice continued her fight. She spent hours filling out forms, making phone calls, and attending meetings. Her efforts strained her personal life and finances. She found herself missing work to deal with legal paperwork and city hall visits. Her boss was understanding, but her frequent absences were starting to raise eyebrows. Bills began to pile up, and the financial strain of caring for Robert, even with Sarah's help, became increasingly burdensome. Alice's friends and family also expressed their concerns. "Are you sure this is worth it?" they asked. "You're sacrificing so much for a dog." But Alice couldn't be swayed. Robert had become a significant part of her life, and she was committed to seeing him safe and happy. Amidst the growing tensions, a turning point came when Alice met Dr. Martinez, a sympathetic veterinarian with a deep passion for animal welfare. He had heard about Robert's situation through Sarah and offered his assistance. "I've seen too many cases like this," he said. "Let me help." Dr. Martinez's expertise and connections provided a much-needed boost. He helped Alice navigate the legal complexities and provided Robert with additional medical care. One day, as Alice was on her way home from a late meeting with Dr. Martinez, she saw a car lurking near the bridge Robert had once lived. She breathed heavily with a great deal of anxiety. She had learned of some rumors about dogfighting in the region, and it spurs a feeling of horror when she knew that Robert could be an easy target. With any doubt at all, she stopped the car and just observed from a distance, with an added effort of trying to identify the occupants of the car. Suddenly, two men stepped out of the vehicle. One of them was holding a big chain, and the other had what resembled a tranquilizer pistol. Alice felt her heart beating faster, realizing what they have intended to do. They were here for taking Robert, or any other defenseless animal, for their fiendish procedures. Panic surged through her, but she knew she couldn't let fear paralyze her. She dialed Dr. Martinez's number with trembling hands, her voice barely steady as she explained the situation. "Stay in your car, Alice," he instructed urgently. "I'm calling the police. Don't let them see you." As she waited, every second felt like an eternity. The men moved closer to the bridge, their intentions clear. Alice's mind raced. Should she intervene or wait for the authorities? The thought of Robert in their hands was unbearable. It was at this moment that as the men got close to the bridge, the sound of the siren was heard all around. The men saw flashing lights far away and quickly understood that they had been followed. They clearly got scared by this and quickly got back into their car, then drove away with a loud screeching of the tires at the night. Alice sighed deeply and breathed a sigh of relief as the police came towards them. With tears in her eyes, she told them what had happened, and they coaxed her to calm down, stating that they would increase patrols in that area. Shaken but grateful, Alice knew how close Robert had come to falling into the wrong hands. The encounter only strengthened her resolve to protect him and ensure his safety. The collaboration between Alice, Sarah, and Dr. Martinez began to yield positive results. Robert's health improved significantly, and he started to show signs of the lively, happy dog he could be. Then an unexpected plot twist added a new layer of complexity to the story. One evening, while Alice was walking Robert in the park, a man approached her. He looked at Robert with a mix of shock and recognition. That's our dog," he exclaimed. The man, introducing himself as Mr. Anderson, explained that Robert had been their family pet, lost years ago during a move. The family had searched for him, but had eventually given up hope. The revelation left Alice reeling. The idea that Robert had once belonged to a loving family was both heartwarming and troubling. If Mr. Anderson's claims were true, it complicated the rescue mission considerably. Alice invited Mr. Anderson to Sarah's clinic the next day, where they could verify the story. To her relief, Dr. Martinez confirmed that Robert's microchip matched the details provided by Mr. Anderson. It was clear that Robert, whose real name was Max, had been part of the Anderson family. However, the Andersons' reappearance wasn't entirely welcome. They were insistent on taking Robert back, despite his evident bond with Alice. Legal papers were presented, and Mr. Anderson threatened legal action against Alice for stealing their dog. The situation escalated quickly, and Alice found herself facing a heart-wrenching dilemma. She had grown to love Robert deeply, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. Alice sought advice from Sarah and Dr. Martinez. They both supported her, but emphasized the need for a legal resolution. "We need to approach this carefully," Sarah said. "Robert's well-being should be our top priority." Days turned into weeks as legal proceedings began. Alice documented every detail of her care for Robert, her interactions with the authorities, and the bond they had formed. The stress took its toll, but she remained resolute. She knew that giving up on Robert now would be a betrayal of everything she had fought for. As the court date approached, Alice prepared herself for the possibility of losing Robert. But she also clung to the hope that the judge would see the love and dedication she had shown and the unbreakable bond she had with Robert. The future was uncertain, but Alice's determination remained unwavering. The day of the court hearing arrived, and Alice felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She had prepared meticulously, gathering testimonies from Sarah, Dr. Martinez, and others who had witnessed her dedication to Robert. As she entered the courtroom, she saw Mr. Anderson and his lawyer, both looking confident and determined. The sight of Robert, now clean and healthier, sitting quietly next to her, provided some comfort. This was clearly evident from the tension, which was evident in the courtroom anytime both the lawyers made their presentations. Mr. Anderson spoke of his family's heartache when Robert, originally named Max, went missing. He described the futile search efforts and the joy they felt upon discovering him again. His lawyer emphasized the legal ownership, making a compelling argument that Robert should be returned to his original family. Alice did the same, and when her time came, she said what she felt about the matter. She told the story of how she first met Robert, what he looked like when she first met him under the bridge, and how he was getting worse and how they became friends. She also drew attention to the fact that all her appeals were ignored by the officials, and she will not stop trying to improve Robert's life. Sarah and Dr. Martinez corroborated her story, emphasizing the significant improvement in Robert's health and well-being due to Alice's care. The judge sat with keen attention, and at times nodded and took notes and occasionally asked questions. Finally, after much deliberation, he asked for a break to time, consider the evidence given. People got up and left the courtroom, and all that was left for Alice was her apprehensions and anxieties. Losing Robert was a big burden on her heart. When the court reconvened, the judge's expression was serious but not unkind. He acknowledged the pain and suffering endured by both parties. "This is not an easy decision," he began. "It's clear that Mr. Anderson's family experienced a great loss when Max went missing. However, it is also evident that Ms. Alice has shown extraordinary dedication and love for Robert, providing him with a safe and caring home. The judge paused, then continued. Considering the bond that is formed between Robert and Ms. Alice, as well as the significant improvement in his condition under her care, I believe that the best interest of the dog must be prioritized. He turned to Mr. Anderson. While you have legal ownership, it is apparent that Robert's well-being has greatly benefited from Ms. Alice's intervention. Mr. Anderson looked conflicted, but nodded slowly. The judge then addressed Alice. Ms. Alice, given your dedication and the evidence presented, I am granting you temporary custody of Robert, with the option for Mr. Anderson to visit and evaluate the situation periodically. A sense of relief flooded Alice's body, and she knew this would only be a temporary measure. That is why after the verdict, Mr. Anderson came up to her. He noticed how much the dog meant to her, and his voice became gentle as he spoke to her. Maybe we can find a way for him to stay with you while still being part of our lives. They agreed to work together, prioritizing Robert's happiness above all. Over the following weeks, Mr. Anderson and his family visited frequently. They saw firsthand the love and care Robert received. Gradually, they accepted that Alice had become an integral part of Robert's life. Finally, after months of cooperative efforts, Mr. Anderson made a heartfelt decision. Robert belongs with you, he told Alice. He's happy here, and that's what matters most. We can still visit and be part of his life, but it's clear he's found his home with you. The legal proceedings were concluded, and Alice officially adopted Robert. The Anderson family remained involved, visiting regularly and contributing to Robert's care. The resolution was bittersweet, but it brought peace and happiness to everyone involved. Alice's life transformed with Robert by her side. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment and joy, knowing she had made a difference. The journey had been fraught with challenges, but the bond they shared made every sacrifice worthwhile. Robert, once a scared and neglected dog under a bridge, now thrived in a loving home. Alice, too, found solace and joy in their new life together, knowing that their story was a testament to the power of love, determination, and compassion. What would you do in this situation? Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment.